In the heart of rural America, nestled among the gnarled trees and overgrown fields, stood Ravenwood Manor, a once grand estate now shrouded in decay. The locals whispered tales of its dark past, warning travelers to steer clear of its crumbling walls and shadowy windows. They spoke of a ghostly figure that roamed the halls at night, a spectre known only as Elizabeth Ravenwood. Elizabeth was the last of the Ravenwood lineage, a beautiful young woman with a tragic fate. She had fallen in love with a dashing soldier named Thomas, who promised her the world. But as the Civil War raged on, Thomas went off to fight, leaving Elizabeth heartbroken and alone. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no word from her beloved. Despair consumed her, and one fateful evening, she donned her wedding dress, believing that if she looked beautiful enough, he would return to her. As night fell, a storm brewed outside, lightning illuminating the manor in flashes of eerie light. Elizabeth waited by the window, her heart pounding with hope and fear. Hours passed, and just as she thought her dreams were over, a figure appeared in the distance. It was Thomas, but as he drew closer, she realized with horror that he was not the man she remembered. His uniform was torn and bloodied, his face pale and lifeless. In shock, Elizabeth rushed down the grand staircase to meet him, but as she reached the door, he vanished into thin air. Heartbroken and consumed by grief, she wandered the halls of Ravenwood Manor for days until she could bear it no longer. On a stormy night much like the one when she first saw Thomas, she took her own life, believing that only in death could she be reunited with her love. Years passed, and Ravenwood Manor fell into disrepair. The townsfolk claimed that on stormy nights, you could see Elizabeth's ghost wandering through the halls, still dressed in her tattered wedding gown, searching for her lost love. Some said they could hear her soft sobs echoing through the empty rooms, or catch a glimpse of her pale figure staring out the window, waiting for Thomas to return. One autumn evening, a group of college students decided to explore the manor for a thrill. Armed with flashlights and bravado, they made their way through the rusted gates and into the overgrown garden. The air was thick with an unsettling silence as they approached the entrance. The door creaked open as if inviting them inside. As they stepped into the ground foyer, dust motes danced in the beams of their flashlights. The air was cold, sending shivers down their spines. They began to explore room after room, each filled with remnants of a bygone era, faded photographs of the Ravenwood family, tarnished silverware, and tattered curtains that fluttered like ghosts in the breeze. Suddenly, one of the students named Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "Did you guys hear that?" he asked nervously. The others shrugged it off as just the wind. But as they continued deeper into the manor, strange occurrences began to unfold. Doors creaked open on their own, whispers echoed through the hallways, and shadows danced just out of sight. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, they discovered an old diary belonging to Elizabeth. As they read her poignant words about love and loss, the atmosphere grew heavier. Suddenly, a loud crash resonated from downstairs. Heart-pounding, they decided to investigate. As they descended the staircase, they were met with an icy gust of wind that extinguished their flashlights. Panic set in as they fumbled to turn them back on. When the lights flickered back to life, they found themselves face to face with a translucent figure, a woman in a wedding gown, with hollow eyes filled with sorrow. "Thomas," she whispered, reaching out towards them. The students froze in terror as Elizabeth's ghost moved closer, her mournful expression etched with longing. "Where is my love?" she cried out, her voice echoing through the manor like a wailing wind. In a moment of sheer instinct, Jake shouted back, "He's not here. He's gone." The spectre paused, her eyes locking onto him with an intensity that sent chills down his spine. For a moment, time stood still as Elizabeth's form flickered like candlelight. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she vanished into thin air, leaving behind an overwhelming sense of despair. The The students bolted for the exit, their hearts racing as they stumbled through the darkened corridors. Once outside, they gasped for breath under the moonlit sky. They didn't stop running until they reached their car parked far down the road. As they drove away from Ravenwood Manor, they glanced back one last time. In the window of the upper floor stood Elizabeth's silhouette, forever waiting for Thomas to return. To this day, Ravenwood Manor remains abandoned and feared by locals. And on stormy nights when the wind howls through the trees, some say you can still hear Elizabeth's sorrowful cries echoing through the night, a reminder of love lost and a spirit forever trapped in a world of heartache. Months passed since the college students had their harrowing experience at Ravenwood Manor. They never spoke of it publicly, fearing ridicule and disbelief. But each of them carried a piece of that night in their hearts, a whisper in the dark, a flicker in the mirror, a dream that always ended with Elizabeth's hollow eyes staring into theirs. Jake, in particular, couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed him home. He began to have vivid dreams: Elizabeth standing at the end of his bed, her wedding dress soaked with rain, her lips trembling as she repeated the same words, "He's still here." Every night, she came closer, and each morning, Jake awoke with frost on his window and the scent of lilacs in the air, the same flowers Elizabeth had once grown in Ravenwood's garden. Desperate for answers, Jake began researching the Ravenwood family, digging through local archives, forgotten newspaper clippings, and even interviewing surviving townsfolk who remembered the estate in its glory days. One elderly librarian, Ms. Agnes Holloway, revealed something that would change everything. There was a hidden room, she whispered, eyes darting around as if afraid to be overheard. Behind the library, the Ravenwoods were a secretive family. Some say Elizabeth's father was involved in the occult, trying to bring the dead back. He thought he could cheat fate. According to Agnes, Elizabeth's father, Lord William Ravenwood, had not only been grief-stricken by his daughter's death, but maddened by guilt. It was he who had forbidden her from marrying Thomas, believing the soldier unworthy of their bloodline. When Thomas left, it was at William's behest and his bribes. The young soldier had died not in battle, but trying to return to Elizabeth after learning the truth. His body was never found. Fueled by guilt and love for his daughter, William spent his remaining years studying dark rituals, desperate to reunite Elizabeth and Thomas even in death. With this new information, Jake knew he had to return to the manor. But this time, he wouldn't go alone. Jake contacted the remaining group from that night: Samantha, Rog, and Lily. After much pleading and persuasion, they agreed to return with him to uncover the truth and, perhaps, bring peace to Elizabeth once and for all. They arrived at the manor just before dusk, the sky darkening with the promise of another storm. The once rusting gates now hung ajar, as if the house was waiting. Inside, the manor was unchanged: dust-covered furniture, the faint scent of decay, and that same oppressive silence. But there was something different this time. The house felt watchful. Using blueprints Jake found in the archives, they located the old library. Behind a massive, dust-covered bookshelf, they discovered a hidden door. With a rusty creak, it swung open, revealing a narrow staircase spiraling downward into darkness. At the bottom lay a stone chamber, filled with strange symbols carved into the walls, shelves of decaying books, and in the center a stone altar. On it, a book bound in cracked leather lay open, its pages filled with incantations in Latin and Old English. Candles long melted stood as if someone had only recently left. "It's a ritual room," Lily murmured, brushing dust from the nearest inscription. He tried to bind their souls together after death, but something went wrong. Just then, the candles flared to life on their own. The air grew ice cold. From the shadows, a faint voice echoed, "Thomas, Elizabeth." Suddenly, the chamber shook violently. The group tried to flee, but the stone door slammed shut behind them. A glowing figure appeared near the altar. "Elizabeth, But this time, she wasn't sorrowful. She looked afraid. "Help me," she whispered. "He won't let me go." From the darkness behind her, another figure emerged, a twisted, shadowed form, his features distorted and monstrous. It was Lord William Ravenwood. "He belongs to us," he growled, his voice echoing with the weight of ages. "My daughter will never be alone again." Jake realized then William had trapped both Elizabeth and Thomas in this realm, unable to reunite, unable to rest. The ritual had brought them peace, it had cursed them. Samantha grabbed the old book and flipped through it, finding a counter-ritual written in blood-red ink. They began the chant, their voices shaking, the walls closing in. William screamed, a bone-chilling wail that threatened to split their minds. Elizabeth turned to Jake, her face pleading. "Finish it." With the last words spoken, a blinding light filled the chamber. William's shadow shrieked and was torn apart, vanishing into smoke. The ground trembled and then silence. When the light faded, Elizabeth stood at the altar, no longer ghostly. She smiled, tears in her eyes. Behind her, Thomas appeared whole, radiant, dressed in a soldier's uniform, his hand reaching for hers. "Thank you," she said softly. With one final glance, the lovers turned and faded into the light together, finally at peace. Epilogue. The manor sleeps. After that night, Ravenwood Manor changed. The storm that had loomed passed without a single drop of rain. The air around the manor grew warmer. The windows, once black with grime, now shimmered faintly in the morning light. Locals reported no more sightings of Elizabeth, no more cries in the night. Jake and his friends never spoke of the experience again, but they often visited the manor from a distance. It remained abandoned, but no longer cursed, just quiet. At the edge of the property, a small plaque was placed under an ancient oak, in memory of Elizabeth and Thomas, love lost, love found, love eternal. And on some quiet evenings, when the wind rustles through the trees, those who listen closely say they can still hear faint laughter, two souls walking hand in hand through the halls of Ravenwood, free at last. Would you like a sequel set years later? Perhaps with new characters uncovering a darker secret beneath Ravenwood? Absolutely. Here's a long, chilling continuation of the story, this time diving deeper into the hidden legacy of the Ravenwood family, introducing new characters, and suggesting that some secrets were never meant to be unearthed. Ravenwood Manor. The bloodline 30 years later time had dulled the memory of Ravenwood Manor's haunted past. The old estate stood silent, cloaked in ivy and mist, its windows broken, the roof partially collapsed. The local legends had faded into mere ghost stories, told by parents to scare children or by teenagers looking to impress dates on Halloween. Most believed Elizabeth and Thomas were just that, a story. No one had dared return since the night the spirits were freed. Until now. In the fall of 2055, the land that Ravenwood Manor stood on was purchased by a wealthy developer, Marianne Blake, known for restoring historic properties. Her vision was to transform the haunted ruins into a boutique luxury hotel. Ravenwood Revival, the project was called. Local protests were ignored. After all, it had been 30 years. Surely whatever haunted the manor was long gone. Marianne's niece Evelyn Blake, a young architectural historian, arrived first to assess the structure. She had no interest in ghost stories. Raised in New York, she believed in logic, in blueprints and history, not in shadows and spirits. But that changed the moment she stepped inside. The house awakens. The foyer was dust-choked and brittle with time. Yet something about the air felt alive. The temperature dropped suddenly as Evelyn crossed the threshold. Her breath fogged. Her phone flickered and died. She shook off the unease and set to work, documenting the rooms with her old camera. In the grand library, she discovered the remnants of old books scorched by fire. One book remained untouched, lying in the ashes of a collapsed shelf, a small leather-bound volume with a broken clasp. Curious, Evelyn opened it. It wasn't Elizabeth's diary, but rather her father's grimoire, written in cryptic Latin and filled with diagrams of rituals, alchemical formulas, and a bloodline. At the very back, a tree was drawn in ink, branching names through generations of Ravenwoods. But the final name on the list stopped her cold. Evelyn Margaret Blake. Her hands trembled. She wasn't just connected to the Ravenwoods, she was one of them. Echoes of the past that night. Evelyn couldn't sleep. The manor creaked and moaned like an old ship in a storm. At midnight, she awoke to a soft voice calling her name. Evelyn. She followed the voice down the long, rotting hallway to the grand staircase. There, at the top step, stood a child, a girl no older than 10, dressed in a nightgown, her eyes hollow and grey. "He's coming back," the girl whispered. "You must finish what was started." Before Evelyn could move, the girl vanished. Panicked, Evelyn fled the manor, returning to her rented cottage, but her mind raced. She began to investigate her family's genealogy. Her mother had died when she was young. Her grandmother never spoke of their past. But through old letters and journals hidden in her late mother's belongings, she uncovered the truth. Her mother had changed her name to escape the Ravenwood curse. Evelyn's true name wasn't Blake. It was Evelyn Ravenwood. A new haunting as construction began weeks later. Workers reported strange occurrences, tools disappearing, eerie whispers, and shadows watching them. One worker fell from scaffolding after seeing a face staring at him from inside a mirror. Another quit after hearing scratching under the floorboards, only to find claw marks on the wood. Marianne dismissed the reports, but Evelyn knew better. She began translating more of William Ravenwood's grimoire and discovered something horrifying. The ritual had never truly been completed. Though Elizabeth and Thomas were reunited, their souls had only passed through the veil, but the doorway had never been closed. Worse, William's final spell, one he never had time to perform, was inscribed in red, "Greater than blood calls to blood. Through the last of my line shall I return." He had intended to possess the final Ravenwood heir to live again in her body, and Evelyn, unknowingly, had stepped directly into his trap. The possession begins. Strange things began happening to Evelyn. She'd lose time hours, sometimes days. Her reflection would linger a moment too long. She began writing in languages she didn't know. The dreams worsened, visions of fire, of screams, of a man with hollow eyes whispering to her. Samantha, one of the original students from 30 years ago, now a folklore professor, heard of the manor's reconstruction and tracked Evelyn down. Together, they uncovered the truth. William's spirit had survived, and Evelyn's arrival had reawakened his power. He needed her blood to finish what he started, but there was a way to stop him, a final severing ritual, hidden in Elizabeth's original diary, which Samantha still possessed. They returned to the manor during the final storm of autumn, the winds howling like screams. Inside, the walls bled, portraits wept, the air pulsed like a heartbeat. In the grand library, with the ritual circle redrawn and the diary in hand, they began. As Samantha read aloud, Evelyn screamed. William's spirit fought to remain. Her body arched, her eyes turning black. The room shook. Suddenly, Elizabeth appeared, glowing, radiant, and no longer mournful. "You do not belong here, Father. Let her go." With a final scream, William's presence shattered, expelled from Evelyn's body and pulled into the void. The manor fell silent, and for the first time in centuries, the Ravenwood line was free. Legacy. Evelyn sold the estate. She never returned. The land was declared off limits, protected under historical preservation law thanks to Samantha's intervention. But something remains. Deep in the woods behind the manor, there is a clearing where the trees refuse to grow, where the wind never blows, and sometimes, on moonless nights, a voice can still be heard. Faint and bitter, blood will call again, because some bloodlines cannot be buried. They only sleep.